So that's what I'm going to do. Let it go to you, Brother Elmo.
Nice Watchtower lesson. Nicely conducted, too. Very good. That's encouraging. I'll tell you, there's something beautiful about the brotherhood that we get to experience. Right on. See, Riley? Yeah, you learned from me. There's just that. You meet these characters. We've got to meet some of you, and we've heard about some of you, and it was so nice to be able to get to know you, and we look forward to building on that. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing of the traveling work, see. But I'll tell you, after meeting you, I'm just more convinced of this than ever. You can take a bunch of nuts a few other ingredients and make a beautiful cake. You wondered how I was going to pull myself out of that, didn't you? An international brotherhood. Despite ourselves, we form one body. That's not easy. You really think about it, we have to work at that. And especially do we have to work at it because of what James says. In our imperfect state, well, with the tongue, we just say things that we just simply wished we would not say. And then on top of that, as humans, we have a tendency to take that and we become upset, we become irritated. It's really interesting. Have you ever heard the phrase, in one ear and out the other? That's not true. You know why? As you well know, and we have been learning, the brain absolutely records every single thing that's said and done. And then years later even, something can be said, and our brain will go back in and we'll pull that file back up. But now, what can happen is it can take one very small item, a negative, a very small negative, and it can sit on it and pet it, and something happens. It's very much like the silverleaf maple in Arkansas. You have those out here, they tell me. When it rains, the leaves will turn up and you have this silver glint to it, and it's beautiful. And you think, well, I'd like one of them in my yard. No, you don't. If you have one, you've got 30. And you know what happens? The roots, in this case, grow top to the ground. And so they'll head for water like any root, but because it's running in that shallow area, it'll run right into your foundation and just break it down. And you've seen some homes that are leaning over, and it's because of that. Or they'll go into your septic system and just destroy it. And you know what that means, don't you? See? So I can remember my father planted a couple of those and thought, boy, we wanted those. And then I remember clearly the entire day it took to root every single one of those things back up. It was a job. But do you see, in the very same way, we may take one of these little negatives and we begin to water it, and we just love it. And it begins to grow, and can you imagine the roots growing down? And in this case, they just take the heart and they just got it ripped in tight. And now it's firm, and now out the top, poof, grows this anger, this resentment. And it's ugly. It's a deep sense of injury, real or imagined. Real or imagined. It can destroy relationships. It can divide congregations. Do you see why we say to you, we have to just let it go? They tell a little story about a bear that was walking by his cabin, and he was hungry, and he smells stew coming out. And he just draws him over, and he comes into that cabin, and there that hot pot of boiling stew sitting on this red-hot stove. So when he reaches out, burns him. Makes him mad. So now he grabs it and hugs it. And it just burns him even more. Now you know what he does? Rips the whole thing off the stove. And he's carrying that thing around. You ever smell burning hair? It stinks, doesn't it? You know what the moral of this story is? Just let it go. Let's examine that very process. Starting to harbor resentment. We just have a tendency, and it includes myself as well. We think others are worse than we are. Isn't that true? Jesus nailed it. Let's turn to Luke 6:42. See, then we minimize our own shortcomings, but we're ready to do something else that Jesus identified. And it's just part of our imperfect nature. And that's the thing we want to remember. Now in Luke 6, and you turn to verse 42, really interesting. Jesus said, how can you say to your brother, brother, allow me to extract the straw that's in your eye, while you yourself are not looking at the rafter in that eye of yours? Remember what we've learned about rafter? Here it is now. We've got a loom beam. Could be 12, 18 feet sticking out of our head. About this size. You're wandering around. Boom. Boom. You're knocking people down. And yet here we are going, just stand still, you sinner. Come here. Come here, you little pagan fella. Here, now, let me get that straw. Be still. Now quit. Get up. Get up. And you want to get that straw out of their eye. No wonder Jesus said, you hypocrite. One translation says, you pretender, you actor. You see what he then says? Get the rafter out of your own eye. Out of my own eye. Then we can see clearly how to help our brother. That's what he in effect said. See, what we begin to do is we start to pick and pick and pick. And that reminds me of peck and peck and peck. And pecking reminds me of chickens. And then that reminded me of when we'd go visit my granny. We loved to stay with her. She had a chicken farm. And you'd go out and you'd open that gate, and here in this L-shaped ranch style was the chicken barn, and we'd gather eggs. We thought that was the best. We thought we were wealthy, see, getting to do that. Now here one morning, we come out and we run immediately. There's a chicken down, and it's dead. Its whole head just bloody. And Granny, how in the world did that happen? Isn't that fox been hanging around? No. Coyote got in here. We heard a coyote. No. Well, what happened? She said, you remember the little fella had the little black spot right up here? Yeah, Granny, is that him? Yeah. She said, you know what happened to him? His own kind pecked him to death. We were astounded by that. Other chickens pecked him to death. Literally pecked him to death. Now here we are. We're picking and we're picking and we're picking and we're pecking and we're pecking our own kind. We're all on the same side. See? And what can literally happen? We could peck one of our fellow believers literally to death. Do you see why we say to you, just let it go? Now, because it's an animal-like trait, we have to imitate one who does not harbor resentment. Now, does Jehovah harbor resentment? Yes, he does. No, he doesn't, does he? Does he get resentful? Yes, he does. Nah, you go, okay, you got it right now. That's right. Psalm 103:9 says that Jehovah does not keep resentful. That indicates that he becomes upset with us. He even becomes resentful. Can you imagine that? But what's the key? Even God Almighty himself does not keep resentful. Even he himself just lets it go, and he forgives us in a large way. Now, that forgiveness now becomes contingent. The two are tied together. You cannot separate them on the fact that we too must learn to just let it go as well. Our very survival is dependent upon that fact. Now, if we want to discuss this thought about not being quick to take offense, see, we have to be careful to not get ourselves upset so quickly. Now, we understand this, please. For some it's easier than others. Doesn't take but a minute for me. I'll just worry over something, follow Lisa around going, why? What do they mean by that? What's that? She'll go, are you nuts? Just let it go. That's how I got the title of this talk. And she has that ability. It just rolls off her back. It just settles in on me. I sit and worry about it. Thank goodness I'm so busy, see. Now, there is something very that can help us immediately, see, and it's really good for all of us. And let's turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 7 and note verse 21 and 22. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 21 and 22. See, do we realize that we often do the same thing to others? Now, here we are, it's upset, we can't stand it, but do we realize that we do the very same thing to others? The wise man under inspiration in chapter 7 and 21 and 22 says this, also do not give your ear to all the words. Is that what yours says? It would seem like ear would fit there, doesn't it? What word do you have there, though? Heart. You see why? It says, do not give your heart to all the words that people may speak, that you may not hear your servant calling down evil upon you, and now it grows roots and it grips your heart, and now you act because you're upset, see? Now what slows it down? Note 22. For your own heart well knows, even many times, that you, even myself, have called down evil upon others. Now that can tend to slow it down. Now let me ask you, did you mean to hurt them? No, not always. Were there times you did? Yes. Isn't that true? I had a couple of other elders with me one day. I wasn't feeling good, had a cold. Kept slamming my car door. I told them quit it. They kept it up. So I wanted them to know. Now I'm upset. Quit slamming my car door. Did I mean it? You bet. Did I tell them I was sorry later? Absolutely. But it happens to us, doesn't it? That's just part of it. Were there times you didn't mean it? Absolutely. Now see, that can slow down what James in chapter 3 calls a raging fire because of that little tongue, like a little match. You remember that? It set a whole woodlands on fire. And now we can't hardly put that out. And that's what's amazing. See, so because of pride, sometimes pride can absolutely do us in. One brother said it's just dangerous to think we know something. And isn't that so? I've been in the truth 20 years. I know something. No, we don't. Maybe we've been accused of something. Now, isn't that the time? See, we didn't even think about doing it. Now, that's the time to get it straight, isn't it? We're going to get out here in the yard and we're going to go at it. Well, let's turn to Matthew chapter 11 and note verse 19. Matthew 11 and note verse 19. Just fascinating. Verse 18 says, John came along. In all honesty, and this is strictly my opinion, there must not have been a more righteous man than John. We don't read of any of his negatives. We read of all, and yet we know he sinned. So here's this beautiful example of one who truly imitated Jehovah, and yet what did they say about him? He came neither eating nor drinking, yet people say he's got a demon. See? Isn't that crazy? Now you turn around and the Son of Man did coming. He's on level with people. He'd sit down and have a cup of wine with you and chat with you and talk and laugh. And what did people say about him? Look, a man gluttonous, given to drinking wine. See that little stab right in there? Oh, I think he could be a drunkard, see? Friend of tax collectors and who? Sinners. You know, he hangs around prostitutes. Now, if you just let that hang here, you see what that says? That's serious business, isn't it? Under the law, what could happen to you? You could be put to death. How did Jesus respond to that? Well, he knew it was baseless. So what did he do for our example? He says this, all the same, wisdom is proved righteous by its works. He too just let it go. So let's not be hasty in forming conclusions. See, here's what can happen. That's like throwing wood to the fire. It starts to build into a legal anger. Now we feel like we can override love because we've been offended in a righteous way. And you'll be talking to somebody, I'm upset. I don't like the friends. Well, now what should we be doing? I don't care about that. Now, you leave me out of it. I'm mad at them, see? And now we've done shoved aside what we ought to be doing, showing love, because now we're righteously angry, see? Let's illustrate the point. What's wrong, brother? You can read it in someone's face, can't you? And we can. Sometimes I'm the same way. What's wrong, brother? I've stumbled. They just don't treat me right anymore here, and it stinks. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to change book studies. I'm going to get over to that book study on Tuesday. They hug you when you come in. They make sugar cookies. They love you. And you get over there and, hey, stinks over here, too. Tell you what, I'm going over to Tennessee. That's right, I'm changing congregations. There's a Kingdom Hall that sits on I-40. I stopped there. They just love you. They hug you. They just don't know you. You know what a brother told me? He said, Steve, if you find the perfect congregation, please don't you ever move there. See, pretty soon we're moving all across the country. We're in Japan. It just takes longer for them to figure out that something ain't right. Now, that makes about as much sense as this. I'm in the 6th grade. Think I know something. You remember that age? Think I know more than Dad, Mom, teacher, see? Began to smell something. Whoo! I shot my hand up. Teacher. She said, Mr. Ellenbaugh, something stinks over here. She said, what do you have on your mind? I said, I think it's her, little old blonde-headed girl that always had sat in front of me. From the time we'd sit in alphabetical order, I now pushed it off on her. When she turned and looked, you know what that little slip of a girl did? Started bawling. But I didn't care. You can't come to class stinking. Isn't that what you've been taught? Wash yourself. You've got to have a clean environment to learn. If she's unclean, she needs to get it straight. And that's just the way it is. I'm not going to be no hypocrite about it. I don't care if she is crying, see? And so now teacher says, well, I'll tell you what. You just sit over here where so-and-so's not here today. Well, thank you very much. And so I get over in that seat. Whoo! Shot my hand up. Stinks over here, too, see? She said, well, Mr. Hellenbaugh, because you're special. Now, you have to watch how you use that word special in the South, don't you? Somebody can say, you're special, or they can go, you know you're special. And you know which bus you ride, don't you then? See, she said, because you're special, we're going to sit in this seat that's over here all by itself, just reserved for people like you. Well, thank you very much. Thank goodness somebody finally recognized. Sitting over there. Touch my hair. Remember those crew cut days, brothers? You'd take that grease. Remember that grease you'd put on there? It'd lay anything back. That stuff turns rancid. You know how it smells? Worse than rancid bacon grease. The stink was on top of my head. The stink had been moving around that classroom. Now, in my defense, I was taught this. If you realize you're the one that's been stinking it up, then be a man and go tell someone you're sorry. So you know where I marched over to? I marched over to that little girl and I said, I am sorry. I was the one stinking it up. And I've been good friends with her and her husband. Took on the magazine just before we left to go on assignment. But you see the point, friends? If we find that we're the ones that's been stinking it up, and that could be the case, if we realize I'm the one that's been raising the stink, then what courage. And you admire that kind of courage when somebody steps up and says, I'm sorry, I'm the one that's been stinking it up. Well, thank you very much. Let's just let it go. Let's go get some ice cream at DQ. You see how that works? You admire ones. You admire ones who step up and say, I'm the one that's been stinking it up. That takes a lot of courage. Jehovah admires that. Now, though, let's continue with that thought of still and yet that some have a tendency to harbor resentment. Something said in a conversation and just didn't sit well with you. You put it in the back burner, but you begin to think about it, see? Now, your next meeting, you waiting. Yeah, let the elder go on by me now. Come on, say something to me. There he didn't. There you go, 39. Did it 39 times this month. Now you get home and you call who? One of your family members, one of your friends, don't you? Hey, the elder hadn't been treating me right again. Yeah, I've noticed it. He doesn't like you. Can't stand you. He didn't like you before you ever knew you. He just doesn't like you. Now you're upset, see? Now you're so angry, you could grab a hold of a post and just twist it. It just eats you up, see? And now you say, but I wouldn't, and we say, I love them, but be careful with that kind of talk. Be careful with that kind of talk. Because, see, when we start to sit on something like that, we start brooding on it, we start justifying it and going, well, now wait, something's going to hatch all right. And it is not going to smell right. Leviticus 19:18 says, do not have a grudge against your brother. Why? It stirs up contentions. Proverbs 29:22 says it stirs up contentions. Carries the very idea that it stinks. It's rotten. On my route, years ago in Tennessee Pride, I'd always had heard about chitlins. I was just so curious I couldn't stand it. And we had a butcher in the back room, and I spotted the little white jug. You know what I'm saying? It said chitlins. And I said, are those things stink as bad as what I've heard? He said, come here. He said, put your nose right down here. And so I was willing to do it. And do you know how when you pop a top on something that's been compressed, you know what you get? It got down. I tried to drink Pepsi and it wouldn't help. It was just stuck down in deep. It stayed with me all day long. You truly must have to cook those things, right, Riley? But you see what happens when we start this stuff? It just stinks. It gets down deep inside of you. It affects your whole soul. You can't enjoy life because it's just eating at us. See, if we're digging up stuff 1 year ago, 5 years ago, just let it go, see? Now, remember we said, yeah, I love my brothers, but I don't. And I would never. Now, you be careful. Look at Matthew 5, 21, 22. Boy, you want to read about a serious sin? Let's read about one. And you know what? We're not dealing with fornicating, adultery, or any of that stuff. Notice what we're dealing with. In verse 21 of chapter 5, you heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you must not murder. But whoever commits a murder will be accountable to the court of justice. However, I say to you that everyone who continues wrathful with his brother will be accountable to the court of justice. But whoever addresses his brother with an unspeakable word of contempt will be accountable to the Supreme Court. Whereas whoever says, you despicable fool, will be liable to the fiery Gehenna. Boy, that's serious stuff right there. Let's try to illustrate that. A number of years ago, first time we ever went in unassigned territory, we were heading to Shelby, North. No, it's not Shelby. Silva. See, y'all almost messed me up. Silva, North Carolina. You know where Silva's at up here in the mountains? Now, picture this in your mind. We're coming out Interstate 40 doing about 65, 70 miles an hour, and there's 7 cars in this little caravan. We're bringing up the rear. And now my father-in-law is in front of us. When he travels, Bob takes everything he owns. He's got a car the size of a boat. It's got mirrors out to here. He's got a camper. It's got everything they've ever owned on the back. Just a matter of time till he did what? Cut somebody off, and he did. You ought to have seen the reaction. Shocked Lisa. This guy in this car that Bob had cut off, you see his head all of a sudden just jerk up. And he looks at whoever the woman is with him in that car, and he says something. And then you see him take that car, and it rockets it out to the left. And it just sits there and shakes for a minute. And then he just absolutely guns it. Then he pulls up alongside of Bob and then shoots it in at him. Can you imagine that? Scared us to death. Lisa went, oh! See? Bob didn't see it. Sometimes he has no idea where he's at in life. This guy wanted him to know it. That wasn't good enough. So now he pulls up like this, looks back at Bob, and he does this. My father-in-law goes, hi, how are you doing? But that changed because this guy then took and shot that car in at Bob. It scared him to death. He hit the brakes immediately, and we did too, and it allowed this nut to shoot on up the highway. Now, you think about how serious that could have been. Now, think about what could have been said in that car, possibly. Can you imagine him? Yeah, he did that on purpose. No, honey. No, he's pulling that camper. He didn't see you. No. Did it on purpose. Tried it in Memphis this morning. Honey, that's the first time we've seen this fella. No. Tried it 10 years ago in Texarkana, Arkansas. I know. He just had hair then. Oh, honey, please, just let it go. Let it go. No. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull up there and I'm going to ram that fella off the road. Can you imagine the rage like that? Now, if he would have hit Bob, what could have happened? What, at the very least, how many others could have been involved? Now, friends, here we are driving down the narrow road to life. It's not a question of whether we'll bump each other. It's just a matter of when we're going to elbow each other. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes not. That's not the issue. The issue is, how will we handle it? Now, we have to be careful. If we go, I can't stand them. Wish they had just quit serving God. See, now, if they quit serving God, what's going to happen to them? And for how long? What's going to happen to us then? See the seriousness of that? So be careful. Now, let's talk about what we need to do so that that doesn't happen to us, so that we enjoy serving in the congregation. What's the first thing you should do when you've been offended? Right away. Go to that person? No, wait. That is a proper step. That's why you nodded, and I understand. But now the first thing we should do is 1 Peter 4:8. Let's turn over there. 1 Peter 4, verse 8. 4, verse 8. See, the thing we emphasize is Jehovah knows He's using a congregation of imperfect people
and imperfect elders. Jehovah knows that. His son Jesus, as head of the congregation, he knows that as well. So now note in chapter 4, verse 8, what's asked of us. Now, it's interesting, the wording, because it says above all things. Now, if you place something above all things, where does it go? It'd be number one on your list, wouldn't it? What's the number one thing that Christians should be doing? Notice what it says. Have intense love for one another. See, that motivates us to get out in service. It'd motivate us to do what? To even love our brothers, some of those that we just don't like a whole lot. See, that intense love is an outstretched love. Now, there's a test of our faith. A brother one time said, it's like a rubber band you stretch out. Then we had a traveling brother that he one day dropped a 22-foot rubber band. I've always coveted that. Can you imagine? 22-foot rubber band? How many people could you get in that thing? Well, that's what it says. We should outstretchedly love others. Now, why? Because love covers what? A multitude of sins. It causes them to go away. If it covers, the clouds cover the sun, what now happens to the intense rays of the sun? They're lessened so that now we're able to cope. Does that mean the sun has gone away? No. Does that mean we don't remember what happened? No. It's just that we now no longer extract a cost. We now say, okay, I'm giving it up. I haven't forgot it, but I'm going to work on it. But I'm going to love you in the meantime with all of my heart. When that happens, we now become indebted to God. Could Jehovah ever owe us something? Yes, He could. Turn to Matthew 6, verse 12, please. You know where we're headed, don't you? Matthew 6, verse 12. Remember the Lord's Prayer? Now, sometimes we hear our brothers pray, forgive us our debts. And that's it. Now, we're not saying there's anything wrong with that. But that's not entirely the full extent of the prayer, is it? Notice why. It says, and forgive us our debts as. See the contingency now? As we also have forgiven our debtors. Well, now that's serious. Now our very relationship with Jehovah is affected. Now, an old Watchtower said, if we're deliberately avoiding and refusing to speak to just one single brother or sister as if they're not part of the congregation, that's a dangerous position. If Jehovah accepts that one as a part of His family, can you or I afford to treat him or her as if they're disfellowshipped as far as you're concerned? Your face hardening or becoming nervous just at the sight of? Could we honestly afford Jehovah to treat us on that basis? To cut us off because? Now, if we don't want Jehovah treating us that way, let me ask you, how many times should we forgive our brothers? Remember, Peter said, 7 times, Lord. Thought he was on something. He missed it by 70, didn't he? 77 times. I knew there had to be a number. There you go. Now we got it. 76. One more time. 77. Now let's get in the yard. We're going to wrestle in that grass till one of us is bloody. This is going to get worked out. I hope you're ready. That isn't what he meant at all, was it? The Lord is saying, surely by the time you got to 77, you forgot about it. Can you imagine carrying around a list that big? Let's see where we're at with the sins. 64. He hardly remember. Yeah, they did. They said something to me now. Well, that's a list. So now, if we don't want Jehovah, see, let's say if we've sinned against Jehovah 3 times a day, He treats us just like we're treating someone else now. We held Him accountable at 77. Now, 3 times a day, and that's a very light number. Do you realize we'd be dead inside of a month? Now, if we don't want Jehovah God doing that to us, let's not be doing that to someone else. Now, what do we need to do? Well, let me share this little point with you. You stand and you talk to who? Look in a mirror. Who do you see? Talk to self. Did you mean to do it? Did they mean to do it? Have you ever done such a thing? What did I want them to do for me? You see the point? One time, friends, I was so mad at a brother I couldn't stand it. He just kept offending me. Couldn't even sleep at night. Roll around and toss and turn. You know how you get? Oh, I didn't even like hearing him comment. I don't think he even belongs here in the congregation. That's what you thought, see? Finally went and talked to him. You have to at some point in that regard, see? He didn't even know he had offended me. Said he was sorry. Who was the one that was hurting herself? It was me. I was the one carrying that load around. Man, was I glad to get rid of that. You see, when we stop to reason that I want Jehovah to treat me the way I'm treating others, that helps us. Now, that's very important. Think about this, a tale of two men. One had been a humble man, a powerful man, though in time he became a king. You remember that? In time, along came a younger man with more ability and talent. They become the best of friends. The first in time became jealous. Then it grew into bitterness, throwing fits of anger, resentment. It resulted in him trying to kill the young man, deeply bitter. The man hounded the young man. It consumed his very soul. He then died a horrible death, cut off from his God. The young man refused to hate the older man no matter what. In time, he just let love cover it over. It's true on two occasions he had opportunity to kill the older man and refused to do it. He just let it go. That young man was David, as you well know. Later, he sinned a sin worthy of death eternal. But his God treated him how he had treated others, in part because David, had just let it go. While Jehovah, held him accountable, he too just let it go. So he practiced true forgiveness. It saved his life eternally. Let me give you a scripture that David applied when he was going through that. We don't have time to look at it, but would you jot down Psalm 38, 12 through 15? Psalm 38, 12 through 15, if you're taking notes. If you're going through something like that, what do we learn from David? He took it to Jehovah in prayer, then he left it with him, but he kept supporting theocracy. You see the key? And he wouldn't speak out against the anointed one of God, and he was a wicked man. We have men who love you. They would give their life. How much more so we would not speak out against those that have been appointed theocratically by God himself. Now, what can we do? 3 things. Try to settle the matter immediately. Well, what do we mean? If we can't go to that person right away, how do we not let the sun go down in our anger? Slow your anger down. Stop that process. Reason it out and go, okay, I'm just going to let it go. Secondly, do not extract injury for injury. Do not fall into that vengeful kind of spirit that can eat our being up, our soul. Then pray for them by name. Boy, that can be tough, can't it? You're already mad at them. Jehovah, please bless, well, you know. If you go ahead and say the name, and I know from experience, it serves as a release. Bless them richly, Jehovah. May they prosper. Then apply Acts 20:35. Practice giving by forgetting. It's the ultimate act of generosity. And then apply the Chip and Dale principle. Who is that? You remember them little chipmunks? One would say, no, you first. No, you first. No, you first. No, you. Be quiet. You're getting on my nerves. But that's the way they treated one another, see? Now, how could we apply that? Now, here you got somebody you're unhappy with, and you say, hey, let's go eat a steak. Have you got that? Feed them a steak. You cannot be mad at somebody when they're trying to feed you. You know, I hadn't been real happy with you. I'm starting to get over it. You know, I was so upset that I'm starting to love you. It's the third one every time it gets them. Man, I love you. See how that works? Then just let it go. A brother called and told me earlier in the year when we were giving this talk, a sister just wanted to pass along someone she had been upset with for a long, long time. Went to her and she just let it go. Said she felt a sense of peace that came over. It makes you feel good for her, doesn't it? You see the point? We prosper when we do that. Let me wrap up this talk with some thoughts that come to my mind. And think about this. It started with a laugh. It started with a laugh at the Kingdom Hall one day. He laughed at me. I did not think it funny. The more I thought and pondered, he seems to always be laughing at me. Why? Soon his very presence disturbed me. Oh, how his laugh grated on my nerves. Such a useless fellow. He must not a Christian truly be. Then I began to avoid this pagan man. What a pretense, a Christian blah. Why, the mere sight would turn my face quite red and hard. I refused to speak to this man, the damage he has done to me. I only wish, I just wish if he would quit serving Jah. There, I said it. His laugh I would not have to bear. I decided in my heart, and then it grew and grew and grew. Into a raging fire it grew. One day I learned, and it must have been a mistake, how he'd helped a sister quite in need. He must have the wrong brother. What a pretense. A brother, ha! I ended up in service with him in the very same car group. Could I stand it? I did not see how. Then he was asked how he learned the truth, and he turned and looked right at me. And he said, much like you. I had no spiritual father. He was a violent man who often abused me, even tried on several occasions. And I could see the tears in his eyes through the rearview mirror. He coughed and wiped quickly. He said, I try to laugh just to cover the pain. You see, Jehovah and the truth and the brotherhood saved my very life. And you know, when I feel like quitting, it's your example. It's your example that builds me up. I know I never tell you, but it does. You see, the moral is this. Do not let it grow. Learn to forgive. Learn to forgive quickly. Cover it with love. Just let it go. You see, then Jehovah will give us a credit that will allow our own sins to be wiped away, and then we will be allowed to live in the beautiful new earth eternally. Why? Because we refused to harbor resentment. We learned how to forgive. It's the very best thing that we can do. It's the very best thing that we can do. So just... Oh, what a beautiful group you are. We've had a good week, hadn't we? Thank you very much.